quiet room, a person sits alone, staring at nothing in particular, yet feeling as if the entire world is holding its breath. The air is still, but inside their mind, thoughts race like invisible currents, pulling attention in every direction. Some thoughts are familiar, old, and predictable, while others flicker like tiny sparks, strange and unfamiliar. The observer inside them watches quietly, noting every emotion, every impulse, yet not interfering, just observing. Most people live like this, day after day, simply watching life pass, believing that watching is enough. They notice their thoughts, their habits, their emotions, but they never realize something extraordinary is happening right beneath the surface, something hidden, something powerful, that waits for the exact moment the observer shifts. The moment the watcher stops being passive and becomes active, in that room, the person feels a strange sensation, almost like a doorway opening inside the mind. They sense a quiet pause between two thoughts, a small but deep space where nothing is happening, yet everything is possible. It is a moment so subtle that most would miss it, yet it carries the seed of creation itself. The air seems charged, as if the unseen energy of the universe leans closer, waiting to see what will happen. The observer notices a thought, a small desire, something like, "I wish I could change this." Yet instead of just noticing and letting it drift away, they linger, focusing on it, exploring it, feeling it. This is unusual, because normally thoughts come and go unnoticed, but now, the mind is alert in a different way, aware not only of what is happening, but of what could happen. It is here that the first spark of transformation occurs. The observer realizes that noticing is not the end, it is only the beginning. The mind is no longer just a mirror reflecting reality. It is a lens that can bend, shape, and even create it. The moment is both simple and profound, like the instant sunlight breaks through clouds, sudden yet inevitable. Outside, nothing has changed, yet everything feels different. The observer senses that the choices made in this quiet moment carry weight far beyond what the eyes can see. Every thought, every intention, becomes a tool, a brush, a way to paint the reality that waits silently to be shaped. The mystery of life is no longer distant. It is close, intimate, and almost tangible. The question lingers in the mind, heavy with potential. What happens when I stop being just an observer and start becoming the creator? It is a question that cannot be answered by logic alone, nor by science alone. It is a question that must be lived, felt, and experienced. Yet even asking, it awakens something, a flicker of possibility that cannot be ignored. And so, in that quiet room, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The invisible currents of thought and intention align, pointing to a hidden doorway, one that opens only when the mind chooses to cross it, when the watcher steps forward and claims the role of creator. The world waits, silent but ready, for the first movement, the first conscious act, the first spark of creation. It is the moment that changes everything, and no one can fully predict what comes next. The person leans back slightly, feeling the quiet hum of thought inside their head. They begin to notice the difference between two forces at play. One is the brain, the other is the mind. The brain is like a machine, wired to react automatically, to process patterns, to follow routines that have been learned over years. It reacts quickly, without pause, without question, keeping the body alive, keeping life moving. The mind is different, subtle, elusive. It watches the brain, it notices its patterns, it questions, it pauses. It has a kind of quiet authority, a soft power that the brain does not recognize. The mind can observe the impulses of the brain and choose whether to follow them, ignore them, or transform them. Most people never realize this. Most people think the brain and the mind are the same, but they are not. A simple example arises in the person's thoughts. A sudden irritation flares up, triggered by a memory or a comment. The brain wants to react immediately, to lash out, to defend, to push against the discomfort. It creates tension, quick judgments, a familiar story of anger or fear. The mind, however, steps in quietly, observing the reaction, noticing the patterns, measuring the consequences. It has the power to say, "I see this, I understand it, but I will not act blindly." This small choice, this quiet awareness, is the doorway to creation. The mind is no longer a passive observer, it is an active force. It can guide the brain, shape behavior, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, reshape reality itself. Every thought becomes a choice, every feeling becomes a tool, and the world begins to respond differently. The person feels the tension between these two forces, and in that tension, a strange clarity emerges. The brain is like the wind, strong and unpredictable, while the mind is like the sail, quiet and deliberate, guiding the direction. Harnessing the energy without trying to control it directly, the realization is almost electric, that life is not only happening to them, it is happening through them, and they can participate consciously. The mystery deepens when they notice that the brain sometimes resists, sometimes tries to reclaim control. It wants the comfort of habits, the safety of patterns, the ease of autopilot. The mind must be patient, persistent, attentive. It learns to wait for the moment when the brain's reaction becomes obvious, when the observer can step in, choose differently, create intentionally. Even the smallest decisions carry weight. The mind can choose to respond with kindness instead of anger, patience instead of panic, curiosity instead of fear. These are not dramatic changes, not sudden miracles, but subtle shifts that ripple outward, changing how the person experiences the world and how the world responds. The observer realizes that these tiny conscious choices are the building blocks of creation itself. And so, a question lingers once more, quiet but profound. If the mind can guide the brain, what could happen if every thought, every impulse, every moment of awareness became intentional? It is a question that cannot be answered fully by logic. It can only be lived, explored, tested, and experienced. The person sits in silence, feeling the weight of potential, the hidden power of the mind ready to awaken. The journey is just beginning, and the first step is simple yet extraordinary. Noticing the difference between the brain and the mind, and realizing that one is not simply a passenger, one can become the driver. The person sits quietly, noticing the subtle difference between watching and acting. They begin to think about something even stranger, something that bridges the world of science and the world of the mind. They recall a principle from physics, a mysterious idea called the observer effect. In the quantum world, simply observing a particle changes how it behaves. The act of watching is not passive, it is active, it has power. The mind leans closer, curious and alert. How could this strange rule in tiny particles relate to thoughts, emotions, and everyday life? Could the same principle apply to consciousness itself? Could noticing a thought, observing a feeling, actually influence reality? The person imagines a small experiment, a coin floating in the air. The moment it is observed, its behavior shifts, changes, adapts. The same could happen inside the mind, inside life itself. They recall moments from their own life, times when simply noticing something created change. A tense argument that softened when they became aware of their own reaction. A project that took shape once they imagined the first step carefully. A habit that shifted when attention was focused on it. Each small observation seemed to ripple outward, unseen but tangible. The mind begins to understand. Attention itself is a force, subtle but undeniable. Suspense rises as the realization grows. What if the observer inside the mind is not separate from the world, but connected to it? What if every moment of awareness, every act of conscious observation, influences not only thoughts, but reality itself? The person leans forward, feeling a mix of wonder and disbelief. It is a strange and almost frightening idea, yet it resonates deeply, whispering of hidden power. They remember reading about famous experiments in quantum physics, where particles behaved differently when observed, seeming almost alive, as if they knew they were being watched. Could this mean that life itself is sensitive to observation? That consciousness is a key player in the unfolding of events? The thought is both thrilling and unsettling. What responsibility comes with the power to observe, to shape, to create? Simply by being aware, the person closes their eyes briefly, imagining the possibilities. Every thought could be a choice, every intention a brushstroke. The line between witnessing and creating begins to blur. The observer is no longer just a passive spectator. They sense that the moment of transformation is near. The same quiet pause noticed earlier, the space between thoughts, the stillness inside, becomes the doorway to creation. Even the smallest acts of attention feel amplified. The mind begins to test the principle, noticing a feeling of doubt and consciously shifting it to curiosity, observing fear and turning it into courage, watching impatience and letting it dissolve into patience. Each small shift creates a subtle change in the inner world, which begins to reflect outward, altering perception, behavior, even circumstance. The mystery deepens as the person realizes that this is not imagination alone. It is a pattern that repeats throughout life, subtle yet consistent, invisible yet powerful. They feel a growing connection between mind and matter, observer and reality, the silent bridge that links thought to world. The question lingers in the air, heavy with possibility. What happens when the observer stops merely observing and begins to act consciously, intentionally, fully? And in that quiet space, the tension grows. The next step is almost palpable, a shift waiting to occur. The doorway stands open, inviting the mind to move from witnessing to creating. The world seems to hold its breath, waiting for the first conscious act, the first deliberate choice, the first spark of creation. The journey continues, deeper and more mysterious than ever. The person sits in silence, feeling the tension between watching and acting. They sense that the moment they have been waiting for is approaching, a moment so subtle it almost goes unnoticed. It is not marked by fireworks or sudden revelation, but by a quiet, almost invisible shift inside. The observer becomes aware that they are no longer just noticing life, they are beginning to shape it. It begins with a single choice, a small decision that seems insignificant at first. Perhaps it is choosing patience instead of anger, curiosity instead of fear, or kindness instead of judgment. Yet even this tiny act feels different, weighty, meaningful, as if it resonates beyond the self. The mind feels alert, alive, as though it has discovered a hidden lever that can move. More than the body, more than the immediate moment, the person recalls a memory, a time when they acted without thought, and the outcome was predictable, ordinary, mundane. Now they notice that awareness changes everything. When the observer becomes intentional, every thought, every feeling, every action carries a new potential. The ordinary world suddenly seems full of possibility, as if waiting for the mind to shape it consciously. A strange energy rises within them. Like a river quietly gathering force, the observer feels it flowing through thoughts, impulses, and intentions, merging awareness and action into one. They realize that this is the hidden doorway the mind has been guiding them toward, a doorway that opens only when the observer steps forward and claims the role of creator. They begin to test it, slowly, cautiously, noticing the subtle changes. A thought of gratitude spreads through the body, and the tension in the room seems lighter. A deliberate intention to act differently ripples outward, influencing interactions and perception. The observer watches these effects with wonder, feeling the power of conscious creation for the first time. The moment grows more intense as they understand the principle. The mind is not a passive reflection of life. It is a tool, a brush, a force capable of shaping reality. The observer realizes that creation is not a distant concept. It is not something that happens to a chosen few. It is always available to anyone who notices the moment and chooses to act consciously. The suspense deepens, for the doorway is still new and fragile. It requires courage to step fully into creation, to take responsibility for each thought, each feeling, each choice. The person feels a shiver of both excitement and fear, knowing that once they cross this line, there is no going back to passive observation. The world outside remains the same, but the world within has shifted, subtly, irreversibly. A question forms, thrilling and profound. If I can create even small ripples in my reality, what could happen if every action, every intention became deliberate? It is a question that excites and challenges, a call to awaken fully, to step beyond comfort, beyond routine, beyond the safe boundaries of autopilot. In that quiet space, the observer takes a breath, feeling the threshold. The hidden moment has arrived, the point where watching ends and creating begins. The mind leans forward, the energy rises, the silent river of potential surges, and the first conscious act, small but powerful, opens the doorway to a life shaped by awareness, intention, and imagination. The journey into creation has begun, and nothing will ever feel the same again. The person leans back, feeling the quiet power of the mind ready to act. They begin to notice that conscious creation is not just a concept, it is a practice, a way of living that can be applied every day. The small choices they make, the thoughts they focus on, the intentions they set, all ripple outward, shaping not only their inner world but the life around them. They recall a morning when frustration threatened to take over, a coworker's careless words sparked irritation, and the old pattern of reaction whispered, "Respond immediately, defend yourself, react as usual." Yet the observer inside noticed, paused, and chose differently. They breathed, stepped back, and responded with calm curiosity instead of anger. The tension dissolved, and the moment shifted. Subtle but real, the situation had changed, not because the world changed, but because they had changed. The mind explores other examples, practical ways to use this hidden power. Visualization becomes a tool, imagining the desired outcome as if it is already real, focusing attention on small actions that align with goals, like speaking with intention, listening carefully, or acting thoughtfully. Mindful awareness of emotions, noticing them without judgment, and choosing responses deliberately. Each of these practices becomes a brushstroke, painting reality in quiet but meaningful ways. The observer notices patterns in everyday life, small opportunities to apply this principle. A habit of negative thinking can be shifted into curiosity. A repeated worry can be observed and transformed into a step toward solution. A fleeting fear can become a signal, a guide to act intentionally rather than react unconsciously. The mind begins to understand creation is not dramatic, it is subtle, consistent, invisible yet undeniable. Even relationships begin to shift. The person notices that when they respond with awareness, empathy, and presence, interactions change, conversations flow differently, conflicts dissolve more easily, and connections deepen. The observer realizes that conscious creation is not about controlling others, but about shaping the energy and intention they bring into every interaction. The subtle changes in themselves reflect outward, altering the dynamics around them. The suspense builds as they realize the larger implications. If small shifts in thought, emotion, and action can create noticeable change, what happens when attention is fully harnessed, every choice deliberate, every intention conscious? The world becomes a mirror of the mind, and the observer becomes not just a participant but a co-creator of reality. The power of creation, once hidden and quiet, begins to reveal itself in tangible ways. They reflect on a few practical habits to strengthen this power. Daily mindfulness practice, taking a few minutes each morning to observe thoughts and feelings, setting intentions before acting, choosing consciously rather than reacting automatically, visualizing desired outcomes with clarity, feeling them as real, cultivating gratitude and noticing positive moments, amplifying awareness of what works rather than what fails. Each habit, small on its own, combines to create a life more conscious, more alive, more responsive to the mind's direction. The person sits quietly, sensing the ripple effect of their attention, feeling the bridge between thought and reality. The observer has learned that the hidden moment of creation is not a single event. It is a continuous practice, a dance between awareness and action, noticing and shaping, observing and creating. Each day, each choice, each intention becomes a step further into conscious life. And in this awareness, the mind feels both exhilarated and humbled, understanding that the potential of creation is limitless, waiting for the observer to step fully into the role of the creator. The person sits quietly, feeling the full weight of what they have discovered. They realize that the observer within is not separate from life, but connected intimately to every moment, every thought, every choice. Every intention carries the potential to shape not only their own reality, but the reality around them. The mind feels alive in a new way, alert, aware, empowered. They look back on the journey, from passive observation to active creation. The small moments of noticing, the subtle shifts in thought and feeling, have already begun to ripple outward, changing habits, interactions, and perceptions. It is proof that conscious creation is not theoretical, it is real, and it is available to anyone willing to notice and act intentionally. The suspense of possibility grows, for the future is not fixed. It is like a blank canvas waiting for each deliberate brushstroke. The observer realizes that life itself responds to awareness, that every intention sets off a chain of subtle but meaningful events. And the question emerges once more: if I can shape my reality moment by moment, what life can I create? The person imagines the world not as something to endure, but as something to participate in, consciously and creatively. They notice the patterns of the past, the automatic reactions that once ruled life, and feel gratitude for the awareness that now allows them to choose differently. The mind is no longer a passenger, the brain no longer the driver. The observer has stepped fully into the role of creator. They reflect on practical ways to continue this practice, awareness in daily life, observing thoughts, emotions, and impulses, without judgment, deliberate intention before acting, choosing responses instead of reacting automatically, visualization and imagination.